These are human issues that we're talking about. The military is a different job. Everyone associates it with, the killing and the death. Most people don't kill. Most people don't see people die. They still have issues. We've worked with law enforcement. We worked with other first responders during COVID, hospital workers, just seeing other people's trauma. You're not a warrior. You're not a commando. You can't commando your way out. You need the tools. The top tier one special operations folks in the world can't manage it. They've been trained and trained and trained. You have mental health educators and personnel that have mental health issues. No one gets away from it, right? You have to deal with it. And the longer you wait, the worse it gets. And then it's harder to deal with. And the older you get, the less you want to do it, less you want to admit it. So you just tackle it right away. It's okay. It's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to talk about it.
That's retired Command Sergeant Tom Slattery, a former Tier 1 special operator in the Army's Delta Force.
I think for me, it's to know that you're not alone. So many people feel completely isolated. They feel alone. They feel crazy. They feel different. They feel unheard, unseen. And just to that person, you are seen, you are heard, you are valuable, and you matter. And you're never alone. There's always somebody that cares about you, that loves you, that wants you here.
That's Jen Slattery, an advocate for servicemen and servicewomen and their families, and Tom's wife. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. Many of us, both in the military and civilians, have presumptions and preconceived notions of special operators. A fantasy world where they're always fearless, hard-charging, and virtually invincible. In this world, they're immune to the emotional and physical issues that others deal with. And we imagine that after their careers knocking heads, kicking down doors, stealing secrets, following the kill chain, and tightening the kill zone, special operators ride off into the sunset. Retired Command Sergeant Major Tom Slattery, a legend among special operators, would disagree. Delta Force is officially known as the first Special Operational Detachment Delta of the United States Army, and it's referred to at times as the Combat Applications Group, Task Force Green, or simply the unit. Delta Force, along with SEAL Team 6 in the Navy, the 24th Special Tactics Squadron in the Air Force, and the Intelligence Support Activity in the Army, or what is known as Tier 1 Special Operators. They take on the most complex, covert, and dangerous missions and are directed by the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense. Delta Force was created in November 1977 after well-publicized terrorist attacks led to the United States government developing a full-time counterterrorism unit. Their first well-known operation was Operation Eagle Claw, the failed attempt to rescue hostages in the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. That mission failed after anomalous weather led to the collision and fire, killing 8 servicemen and a civilian in an attack that had to be aborted. In the aftermath, the U.S. created the Special Operations Command to coordinate among the services. Since then, Delta Force operators have conducted operations on at least 6 of the 7 continents, taking on tasks as disparate as battling in the Al-Anbar region of Iraq during the Iraq War and the Battle of Mogadishu to the invasion of Panama and the NATO intervention in Bosnia. Delta Force played a role in Colombian and Mexican drug wars and Cold War operations, but the tempo and the nature of its work intensified during the global war on terrorism. Tom was a senior non-commissioned officer in Delta Force, one of the most secretive and elite special operations units in the United States military. In a long career that involved thousands of missions over the course of 20 years, Tom participated in hostage rescue and capturing and killing high-value terrorist targets, and he also fought for his life and saw his friends killed and maimed. Tom and his wife, Jen, are now focused on healing wounds, battling complex post-traumatic stress, and providing others hope and resources for healing through their nonprofit, the All Secure Foundation. At a time when the divorce rate is soaring in special operations communities and suicide is a grave concern, the foundation provides retreats and workshops for special operators and their spouses that focus on healing wounds and breaking the generational cycle of trauma that can begin for many former special operators and their loved ones. The foundation also provides an online platform for spouses and families, individual and couple coaching, community resources, and a library of books and other materials focused on healing and finding peace. In his 2019 book, also named All Secure, Tom talks about how the enemy cost him 3 marriages, destroyed his physical health, and psychologically crushed him. He discussed how the toll almost led to him killing himself in 2014 until a lifeline was thrown to him by who he describes as an extraordinary woman, his current wife, Jen. It wasn't until then, Tom writes, that his most important and most difficult mission began: healing. Jen is an award-winning filmmaker and photographer. She spent 3 years as the director of film and photography for an elite special operations training company embedded with the Navy SEALs, the Green Berets, and the Army Rangers in large-scale training missions. During her time embedded with special operators, Jen says she began to see a pattern with soldiers, sailors, airmen that she worked alongside, and began to work to find answers for how to help them with their post-traumatic stress and how to help their family members, who also faced what we call secondary post-traumatic stress, innocent casualties of America's longest war. Jen is the founder of a platform that empowers women facing the challenges of post-traumatic stress, and she's also the co-author of Arsenal of Hope, Tactics for Taking on PTSD Together. Tom says he learned from Jen that humility, the ability to admit his weaknesses and faults, and the power of being of service to others who are suffering can be an important part of his healing. Today, Tom and Jen are going to discuss the bloodshed, wounds, moments of guilt, depression, terror, substance abuse, and the aftermath, the toll on families, the gift of vulnerability and humility, lessons about mental health that can benefit both members of the military, their families, and anyone. I want to thank Jason Ursay, the host of the podcast Missing in a Moment and Santa May Be a Criminal, for both the inspiration for this episode and connecting Jen, Tom, and I. So, Jen and Tom, just wanted to thank you for joining. We were talking about this a little bit before, but my friend and fellow podcaster Jason Ursay and my former guest Kevin Grogan had suggested you guys, as you had gone on Kevin's show End of Watch, to talk about mental health in the military, and I had on my end. I hadn't realized it, but I had read a book about a man named Eric Blam, who is a Navy SEAL who had been blinded during his training, but was still able to, stay qualified and get deployed. And unfortunately, tragically, he died after his last deployment. And I'm just a naturally curious person. And that book explored also the impact, not just of his death, but of his deployments on him and his mental health, and then also on his family. And I had come across some of the early work you were doing. So when I was researching this and thinking about asking you guys to come on, I was really thrilled to see how much progress you guys had made. So I just wanted to thank you. Both for the service and for coming on.
Oh, thank you
very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Jinx.
Right. Right. It's a good way to go, right? So I was gonna, Tom, I've read your book, All Secure, and I wanted to just ask you a little bit about what caused you to gravitate toward the military and then eventually special operations. And I'm just wondering, like, when you were a little kid growing up, did you ever think about the military or some other profession? I know for me, I thought about doctor, firefighter, and then, all those things. But, when you were young, what did you think your future would look like?
Yeah, that was it. Doctor, firefighter, cop. I'll be a cop. I tell people what to do. It was one of those same, all kids want to do that. Then, military, John Wayne and the Green Berets. I love that movie. And then I would play with the little Green Army men with my brother, set them up, little sniper positions, little minesweepers going through, and then would use bottle rockets and firecrackers to kind of go to war with each other and blow each other up. And then that kind of grew. But
Who would win?
yeah, who melted the most fast? I'd like have a moat of fire and get across that, but it's one of those.
The real question was, who was the green ones and who were the blue ones? You or your brother? Who got which ones?
It's all green on green. But not good anymore, man. It was all green on green back then.
So it was less war and more just fragging the same side.
One organization went to war. So that's what happened. It's a civil war, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, I had no plans to join the military, and a friend of mine did after graduation in '85, and I was swinging a hammer, working. And I already blown college. Money. So I wasn't getting that opportunity unless I did it myself. So my friend came back that late summer of '85 and from basic training. And he was telling me it was great. My haircuts didn't bother me. I'm going to Germany for 2 years. I'm like, what? And so we were driving up to a John Cougar concert in Indianapolis that night. And I stopped by the MEP station and signed up that night. And then ended up finally going in under the delayed entry program in February '86. And it was like 4 years in and out, right? Get some college money, I'm done.
Had you, before you, went into the recruiter station and eventually joined, had you been exposed earlier in your life to people who were working in the military? Because I'm thinking around that time, it's not a time that we're in war. A lot of people go off to the military to get their college degrees. They do maybe 2 tours. It's, there's a lot of peace. And I was just wondering, were you exposed to it at all before you made the decision?
Not really, other than my brother and I couldn't tell you why I joined the military and went to basic training between his junior and senior year. I think he was going to teach at West Point was one of his things. He was pretty intelligent, but I made fun of him. I laughed at his hair, the senior, you idiot. You joined the Army. What a fool. And yeah, and there I was. There I went. And I had nothing to do with it. I thought my grandfather he was always in bed on oxygen. I thought that was mustard gas. My other grandpa had no legs. And I thought I don't know why I thought these things. I found out as an adult. None of that was true. Both his legs blown off in the war. And what war? I don't know. I don't know. And then I found out as an adult, none of that happened. They were just sick. I'm like, oh, so I had zero experience with the military or what would ever happen.
Did you grow up in a small town, big city?
Tiny town. Columbus, Indiana. It was just, I was born in a smaller town, Seymour, Indiana, but we moved to the big city of Columbus. Yeah, and that's where I met Jen in Seymour, Indiana.
Yeah. I was talking to someone recently and they brought up this idea. I was asking how she became an attorney because she was never exposed to it. But, we were talking about how all the research shows the more you're exposed to a certain profession, like if you're exposed to engineers or doctors or lawyers, the more likely you are to try and pursue one of those careers. And our conversation kind of jumped over to the military, and the point that she was making was, well, when you grow up in this small town, like the options might be go work at the factory, go work in a coal mine, or join the military. And that's all that's sort of there because people aren't thinking
options.
Literally, you just described my dad. He joined the Air Force. His father was a coal miner. And I said, why did you join the Air Force? He said, I could have been a factory worker, a coal miner, or, find odd jobs in my small town. So I picked the Air Force.
Oh, wow. Where did you grow up, Jen?
I grew up in St. Louis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there you are. So as soon as you hear this story, Tom, you end up, I guess, going to a recruiter and enlisting. What was it like when you first went off to boot camp?
Horrible. Horrible. I flew from Indiana to St. Louis, and I got on a bus, and it was kind of gentle. Hey, everybody line up, get on the bus, civilians, and no drill sergeants inside, just that little handler. And I fell asleep. I think it's an hour and a half, 2 hour bus ride to Fort Leonard Wood. And I woke up to 6 or more drill sergeants in the aisle of our bus screaming. I think they snuck on and started screaming, and everybody awake, throwing luggage out the windows, opening the back door of this bus, going, "That back door works, the windows work, get off my bus." I'm like, oh shit. Screaming and chasing people and pushing them down and lining us all up on this concrete sidewalk with little squares. Just dropping people, making people cry. I'm your mommy now. Your mommy's gone. She doesn't love you. And then, dropping soap on the ground, dish soap or, laundry soap on the ground that mommy sent you. It's funny. And then drill sergeants making them lick it up. I'm like, this is different.
Not what you were expecting.
You're told to do something and not doing it. Now I mean it next time. Okay. And then I mean it. Yeah, this guy meant it right away. He meant it right away.
So what was the experience like I had told you guys earlier that I had this friend who she grew up with me, she went to high school with me, she was somewhat insecure, really sweet person. She went off to college for a year and then decided to join the Marine Corps. And I remember going out to lunch, Chinese food. I will never forget this lunch. And her just standing up from the table as I came in, and me being like, you were not that girl anymore that anybody's going to push over. And it wasn't her physical size or anything like that. There was just this presence. It was like she was it's like they had made a new human being who had the brain of some elements of the brain of the girl I knew left in it.
Confidence. Added on top of that was confidence. They can't change who you are, but they can give you a skill and give you confidence that you believe that you probably never believed growing up. They used to call it an obstacle course that you go through, and they finally changed it. Mentally, the words matter. It's a confidence course. You go through and you tackle those obstacles, and you gain confidence. And so the Marines take everything away like everybody else, and then they give it back to you. And what they give you back is confidence and discipline. And you're sure of yourself, and you're just waiting on orders to go do that thing, whatever that thing might be.
So for you, ultimately getting out of boot camp, what did your military occupational specialty end up being? What were you going to be focused on?
I was looking to be like a medic or something in the military because I had no idea. And my recruiter obviously had a different idea for me. It was going to be a 12 Bravo combat engineer. He's like, you blow stuff up. I love to, you like to build stuff. I go, yeah, that's what I do now. I build things. He goes, man, that's what you want as a combat engineer. I go, yeah, okay, I'll do that. I'm like, okay, quota, check, filled. And, it was okay. It was like,
you think that was more in his interest than yours?
Yeah, I don't care about where he only wanted me to pass, there went that word. Basic training. He wanted me to pass basic training, so he got credit for it. That's all he cared about.
And then, so what does a combat engineer do? Engineer is such a fancy word.
I work for the Army Corps of Engineers now. It's one of those, you're an infantry guy and they hand you a shovel also. It's, there's the tanks want to go through here, take out those landmines. Oh, the infantry needs to get through that concertina wire. Use your Bangalore torpedoes. Okay, so we got to go through the mines and blow the fences so you guys can come on through after we're already there. I got you. So that was one of those. And I went mechanized combat engineer in Germany. So I'm driving an armored track, armored personnel carrier. I'm driving this thing. So it's nothing like an engineer. I'm a driver now. I'm driving other engineers to, drop them off and have them dig holes. So it sounded sexy. It didn't turn out sexy.
I still hear about these driving courses, by the way. I'm a professional driver.
I'm sorry, Jen.
I'm highly trained.
Well, in just thinking about sort of like, the experience of being in the military and, when I was growing up, I am thinking like Clinton administration, Reagan administration, there weren't, the military was seen as a place you'd go off for a couple years, whatever your tour was. Maybe you do a second tour. But it wasn't going to be a career. It was going to be a stepping stone to something. What were you thinking when you were going into the military, Tom?
College, in and out. I had no clue that it was an entire ecosystem of the planet. There's every job in the military. I didn't know back then. I just, I did it for college money. We weren't at war. So I was really impressed with people who signed up in the last 20 some years while we were at war. Like you talked about peace. Vietnam was the last thing we did. I think while I was in, we had Panama and Grenada while I was trying to get in. And it was in and out, nothing. I'm like, oh, those aren't even wars, right? Those are too quick to be called a war. So we weren't at war anywhere. So for me, it was easy. College money, in and out. I'll go to Germany. That was my thought process, what I could get from me, right? People sign up in the last 20 years knowing we're at war. Sure, there's something about them as well, but I think that's more of a patriotic, I'm going to help my country and I'm going to help our armed forces. And they sign up for that stuff. I've heard a lot of patriotic stories of people signing up while we're at war, and that's impressive to me.
So this is actually a decent segue. Jen, I know you've worked with a lot of special operators. Do you hear similar experiences to Tom's in terms of what attracted them to the military? And yeah.
Yeah, I think I worked alongside special operations for about 3.5, 4 years. And I was always very, very curious, like, why did you sign up? What was the attraction? And I think I was looking for what Tom just said, like this big patriotic story. And on occasion, I would hear it like, hey, I was in high school when 9/11 happened. And that moment, I knew as soon as I could, I was out, I was going to serve. On occasion, I would hear that. But most of what I heard was like Tom's. I was directionless. I lived in a small town. I didn't know what my options or opportunities were. I thought I could see the world. I thought I could make difference. And so I signed up. That's probably the most common story.
What are the other stories you hear? I always hear the judge gave me the option.
Is that an option?
Smartest guy in special operations. Truly, we would go on these missions and he and I would sit and wait because he was the pyrotech guy. So he would make all the bombs. And he would sit and talk quantum physics. Like I would always have to be like, Rob, slow down. Or like, I don't know where you're going here. He told me his story of 17, I stabbed a guy. So the judge said jail. And he's like, I know you're not jail quality. I know you're a good man. So I think you should go to the Army. And it's because his mom was a meth head. His dad was in and out of prison for murder. His grandma was a meth head. He told me about how his brother and him ate out of trash cans most nights.
Oh, wow.
So he was attacked and defended himself. But again, like had he been in a really good home, this guy would have like won the Nobel Prize. Genius man. So many people who don't have opportunity that were given that choice. The military actually is a really wonderful place for a lot of people to end up. It's the only family some of these guys and gals will have ever had.
That's for a later topic too. If everything we talk about, oh, war screwed me up. It's like, no, childhood trauma is most of what we see.
Right.
I meet a lot of West Pointers too. I mean, I did meet people who went the academic route. They wanted to be an officer. They wanted to come in, they wanted to make a difference. But I would say most are like Tom or my dad's or Rob.
Right. One of the things that I often think about is, over the years and different elements of work I've done, I've been exposed to military families. And, my gut or my initial reaction is to say that there are a lot of misconceptions about them. But I think the reality is like we have very little idea unless you're close to it or exposed to it, what it's like to be in a military family. And I'm thinking about things like the constant moving and having to change schools, the worry about your mom or your dad or your spouse who's being deployed, the, anxiety related to that, or constantly having to meet new people. And I was just wondering from your perspective, like, what is do you two think that the military is doing enough for anything? Are they doing anything before, people enter or as people are entering to help prepare the servicemen and women and their families for what's ahead of them?
They didn't, and I would say they probably still do not. It costs money. It's not their mission, like the Department of Defense's mission is to train you up and send you off to war. It's the defense of the nation. Do they care about your mental well-being at the time? No. They'll lie to you and tell you they do. Humans before hardware, but ask them where their money goes. They can't prove that they're doing what they say.
Yeah, I think it's already different than what I've seen. I started working with Tom in 2013. So where I've seen it to now, there has been more programs introduced. There has been people that, leaders who have come out and they've become very vocal about mental health. So it is different already in the last 10 years.
True individual leaders, though, not overall the arch. The government is not putting in, but only the individual leaders who care enough and have seen enough and know what can happen. Bring nonprofits like ours in and other people to talk. But they have to be creative about how to find the money. And they're running out of that money, and it's very difficult.
Tell them to trade in a jet.
I'm right. It's a one jet. Right. I know. I was in Vermont this weekend in Burlington. I was watching the F-35s take off.
Just one of those.
Yeah. Not even like half.
That would help all the nonprofits.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, we still won't lose the war. just look at the combat-related deaths versus suicides over the times of the wars we've had. And even people like the Greatest Generation didn't have this problem.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. They just didn't talk about it.
They didn't talk about it.
High suicide rates and one of the highest in domestic violence.
Remember Rambo? Did you see Rambo, the movie?
I did. Oh, yeah.
Post-traumatic stress breakdown.
Yeah.
And the reason the sheriff was so hard on him was he fought in the Korean War.
Mm.
He didn't like the special ops guy, so conventional soldiers taking on a special ops guy.
I think I was the only person who cried through Rambo, but I quite honestly was like, "Was somebody leave him alone?"
It was so sad. It was sad. No. Well, one of the things that I in my career, I've obviously worked in mental health. I also did some work with the military health system, and I remember being struck by the Army Medicine's motto. And it was something along the lines, I may butcher it, but it was like to conserve the fighting strength. And that was really striking to me for like a medical outfit, because I think embedded in that notion is that Army medicine's role isn't necessarily to heal, but to heal in so much as it can get that soldier back onto the field. And beyond that, goodbye. And, also that notion that, that for the families, Army medicine, Navy medicine, they exist so the warriors don't have to worry about their families at home. And I was telling you guys a story off mic about going down to Keesler Air Base and in Gulfport, and they had, in my mind, a really enlightened wing commander, which is like the base commander in the Air Force. And I was talking to her and the woman who is in charge, the doctor who's in charge of the military treatment facility there. And one of the points they were making to me is that the military does operate like this. I was talking to the head of the military treatment facility, and she was talking about this idea that, yes, we exist to preserve the fighting force. And when we deal with post-traumatic symptoms, it's often with the servicemen, not with their family members and that secondary post-traumatic stuff. But it's really just to get that pilot that we've invested millions of dollars in back up in the sky in a plane. But her thought was that actually it doesn't just happen, this post-traumatic stress, because of one event. It happens because of a series of events, some, to your point, that may start in childhood, but certainly a series of events in the military. And that if they address those earlier on, they would decrease the long-term pressure, that the nation has in terms of taking care of these folks over the long run, but they would also have a stronger military. And she was making the point that we take a very short-term approach to taking care of the health of our servicemen and women and their families, and that a longer-term approach would really pay off.
Yeah, they work in the physical.
Yeah.
Broke your leg, compound fracture. You could have light duty, sit behind a desk, do a different job until you heal for 4 to 6 months. Now, if you say I'm an alcoholic and I need to go deal with this because all the stress and pressure, they're like, you're out of here. It's like, really, it would take a lot less time for me to kick the booze and be back healthier than that broken compound fractured leg guy. Yet I don't matter. Well, you just need to stop drinking. Oh, I got you.
Or better yet, just stay in, keep drinking, but shut up about it.
Yeah, just shut up about it.
Stop telling
people.
people.
What we do is we drink. What are you, a week? Go drink more. You'll get better at it. But yeah, they don't, number one, know how to deal with the mental aspect. Two, the Army medics are only trained to give you a Band-Aid, splint your leg, and get you off to someone who can take care of you. And then three, everyone's afraid to talk to the shrinks, the docs in their organizations, because they might be deemed crazy, if you will, or incompetent or incapable of doing their job, and they'll get removed or they'll lose their security clearance. So there's all these obstacles against asking and getting help.
Yeah, I've noticed that the people who really do get desperate for help will quietly get help outside of the military health system.
That's why we exist. We have licensed social workers that only coach. So when we've been heading up at organizations, like, I need to know what's going on with my soldier. Like, we don't tell you. That's why they come to us. And so they come to us to just unload their dirty laundry and their trauma. And we help give them the tools through our coaches. We give them all the tools they need to practice, develop muscle memory, and get over the other bad habits they have of anger and aggression.
What do we do for the families? How do we prepare or support the families? Does the Department of Defense have, I know they have a part of the Department of Defense that focuses on military families, but
preservation of the force and family, which is broke. It's been broke since COVID, when all the money went to vaccinations. So they used to be able to bring people in, and now they can have a pizza party. Maybe. All the chaplains were given money as well. That money is dried up, so they can't bring anybody in. So literally, humans before hardware, all the money's gone to the hardware or other humans in another country for hardware.
Right.
Yeah. And quite honestly, Tom and I we spoke in Congress back in 2017. We went and met with a bunch of senators, I think 12 over the course of 2 days, senators, congressmen, reps, and not one, but three separate people told me, oh, it's so great to have a veteran spouse up here. I've never sat down and actually spoken to a spouse before.
Oh, wow.
Yes, three different, not just one. I had totally condescending, like, let me hold your hand and you just tell me how hard this is.
Poor girl.
And it's, it's so disgusting on so many levels that you represent the people and you don't know who the people are. You don't know what their issues are. You don't know how to help them, or you don't even care to help them. 5 seconds
after they walk out the door, you forgot and you're on to the next one. So nothing.
Well, that's so striking because it makes me think about the fact that at least in the United States, such a small percentage of the population ever does military service. If I go back to my dad's generation, which was Vietnam and the draft, you get a lot larger percentage of people who are exposed, but I never really thought about what impact that has on politics or community, that so many of us don't get exposure to people who either grew up as a part of a military family or who served, and how that creates even a greater disconnect.
I just heard a story someone shared with us. I think he was 10 years old. This boy was drawing pictures of like cemeteries and stuff at school. And so the teacher alerts the principal, mom and dad get called in, we're concerned about mental health issues. This kid keeps drawing pictures of cemeteries. Like, we're scared he's going to hurt himself or someone else. It took a good therapist about 5 minutes in talking to this boy who said, why are you drawing pictures of cemeteries all the time? He said, well, my dad's a Green Beret. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, but that means he's going to die any day now. And so,
oh, wow.
Because my dad's overseas now, I'm just waiting for his funeral. So every day I just draw pictures of his funeral. So
that's so sad.
It's so sad. And, we have people come into our organization, generals, lieutenant colonels who are medics, people who you would feel like these guys know, right? We help their kids who they're like, gosh, my teenage or my 14-year-old's really acting out. And sure, teenagers do, but the way they describe the symptoms, it's like, have you had them look at for secondary PTS? Sure enough, they get an evaluation. Bam. It's not OCD. It's not ADHD. It's not he's a troubled or bad kid. It's this kid has secondary trauma from war and nobody's addressing it. And they're reaching out and screaming for help, but mom and dad don't even know how to help.
And secondary PTS is that idea of post-traumatic stress that sort of like happens when people either witness or exposed to the trauma of others. You know, it can lead to anxiety, avoidance, you know, a lot of the emotional distress and even sort of like passion fatigue. Is that a fair definition of it?
Yeah, essentially walking on landmines or trying to avoid them, or eggshell syndrome, we call it. So as a spouse, say, for instance, I have someone in the home with complex PTS. My husband has served a bunch, but every time he comes back, he's different. And I don't know when he walks in the room if he's going to be angry, if he's going to be aggressive, if he's going to ignore me, if he's going to take off for a couple of days because I did or said the wrong thing. So I'm constantly evaluating. What am I saying? What am I doing? What is, how's the house? Is it clean enough? Are the kids quiet enough? Are they getting done with? So I'm completely rewriting who I am. I'm developing a lot of nervous tendencies, anxiety, probably depression, probably also losing sleep. We don't talk about the military spouses that also become dependent on alcohol and drugs as a coping mechanism, because as much as we are helping our veterans and starting to understand it, nobody's helping the spouses. Nobody's helping the kids.
And the warriors don't know that they've become that as well.
No.
The second yes for the spouses
Yeah.
is because they're becoming someone different than who they were. And the warrior's already become someone different because he's doing things he doesn't want to do. He's self-medicating. He's hiding. He feels, like he's worthless.
Right.
He's not doing his job. And that disconnect between civilians and military goes both ways.
Yeah, in the recruitment posters, they show them lots of cool things, but
come on, it's great. It's a fun time. It's a party, and nobody shoots back at you. And then, if you're in the military for a long time, you don't know what civilian world is. And if you're in the civilian world, you don't know what the military is, and we fear what we don't understand. So that disconnect between versus we're both civilians. I do a different job than you, basically. Until military people, no one cares what you did, man. Come on, brother. No one knows when you're in line of Hope Depot you were a 4-star general, so quit acting like it. Quit acting like you matter to these people. They don't care. Just contribute now how you can.
Jen, the description that you gave of not knowing what your spouse is like, and kind of the image I get in my head is like walking softly on the carpet because they're, to your point about eggshells, there are eggs under it, and I don't know what I'm going to do that's going to cause one of those to crack. Like, I imagine being in that environment, it's hard, your spouse has changed, but it's also hard to be you. For like the kid to, kids naturally want to go share their stories with their parents. So they want to do X, Y, or Z, but it sounds like everyone sits and waits to see who they really have. What's the toll on families?
It's terrible. The Pentagon said in 2018, I believe, that there were 200 suicides attributed to spouses living in this type of situation.
Oh, wow.
So people aren't talking about the wives, primarily wives, my wives and, husbands and wives, but I'm talking statistically with special operations. That's where my world is. And that's where my research and numbers come from. But we lose at least 200 spouses to secondary PTS. Children, it's anywhere between 10 to 17% higher suicide rate if they're in the house with someone with complex PTS.
Wow.
So spouses are taking their lives, children are taking their lives. Why? Because it feels like a trap. It feels like there's no way out.
That's poor behavior.
Well, and we also, like, the stats tell us that, let's say you have a parent who commits suicide, you are 7 times more likely to commit suicide later in life as a child. And we're constantly talking about, I was telling you guys about a New York Times article that I had read about suicide being a huge problem in the military among people who aren't even deployed, and it was the New York Times did a great story on it, but I would feel better about it if I hadn't been reading that story since, 2007. And, if I were to drive the 19 miles over to the Pentagon, I'm sure everyone in the building would tell me that this is a huge issue. But I feel like it's a perennial issue that that while it makes the newspapers or makes TV, we're not really doing anything about it. And then secondarily, it's got this echo effect on the families. Even if it doesn't lead to suicide, we know that when someone commits suicide, all sorts of terrible things happen in the family. What are your thoughts on the suicide problem?
Oh gosh, it's so difficult. It's a really dark space, obviously. I think I simplified it before we were in a Senate hearing for the VA as well. And the head of the VA asked me, why do you think veterans are taking their lives? At this time, I was on the phone with 11 soldiers or sailors a day almost. Early part of our foundation, I was doing a lot of that triage work. And so they were saying, like, what are the commonalities? What are you finding? And how do we reduce it? For one, you're not going to stop soldier suicide. You won't. Humans will take their lives no matter what occupation they have. But what you can do is create a life they don't need to escape from. And that's going to happen in a multitude of ways. For one, it's understanding that traumatic brain injury, right? So these guys get blown up constantly. Not only are they blown up, but when you shoot your weapon constantly, you get these tiny concussions. When you have traumatic brain injury like these guys do, your chance of having suicidal ideation goes through the roof. So what we have to understand is part of this is biology. 90% of the people who take their life in this community are heavily intoxicated or on pills. So it doesn't sound like they really want to do it. It sounds like they have to get to the point where they're almost unconscious to do it. And then 80% are after a family incident. So not what's happening. I lost Bob overseas. You hear a little bit of that, but really what we're discovering, it's issues in the home. So I'm getting another divorce. My kids are afraid of me. I don't have purpose anymore. I was just a warfighter. Now there's nothing left for me. And they tear the home apart in this process, which tears them apart because these men will say the same thing. I love being a protector. I was born for this service. Now I've become the monster that I was trying to protect my family from in the first place.
And bad parents, right? You have bad parents everywhere, and then the kids grow up not being such a well-rounded, balanced person. A lot of it in the military ends up being bad or non-parenting, right? Or single parent raised children who miss their mother or father, who are always gone, plus the stress of that. And then of course you come home and you act poorly. We behave poorly as humans because we're given awards to be violent and aggressive, right? We're promoted for it. Different human being, and you don't know it. It's normal to you. Your spouse picks up on it, but she's slowly changed, right? Like you watch somebody kind of gaining weight over years. You don't really notice it, but if you haven't seen them in 3 years, like, whoa, man, that was an instant change. It's a slow boil. And then that rolls into guilt. I was a bad father. I'm a bad husband. I'm a horrible individual. And then that turns to shame. It goes from I did bad to I am bad. Once you sit there and think you're bad all the time, you start to believe it. Right. And then that suicide just weighs on you. And I'll tell you, you spend a career fixing problems or removing them. And if you can't fix the problem, which is you think, then you think about removing yourself.
And guns are part of truly guns become like part of their hands. It's like part of who they are. So
it's like their toolkit, right?
It is. Yeah. It's the toolkit.
But think about the NFL, right? So we do a lot of studies, and I've talked to NFL players, and they say the exact same thing. I was rewarded by millions of dollars and millions of people to be aggressive, to hit, and to hurt, and I don't have any way to turn that off when I go home. NFL players say the same thing.
It's muscle memory.
Muscle memory, yeah.
You got to break that. Like if you shoot a pistol growing up and you shot it wrong, you're really good at shooting it wrong. And then you come to me and you're like, teach me how to shoot. And I observe you for a bit. I'm like, okay, I know what's wrong. I can fix this, break it, but it takes me a bit to get rid of the old habit. And then it takes me a bit to get the new habit in. And then you'll screw it up down the road and you'll go back to the new habit and back and forth until the new habit is the dominant thing. It's exactly here with muscle memory of aggression and violence and anger. And, that snipey little remark. I can come back to my wife pretty fast. She says something snippy. I can destroy her in a second. I can easily verbally destroy her in a second. And then if I have to, I go physical. If I'm going to lose, I'll go physical.
Yeah.
And that's just who you are. And you have to break that habit. You have to get out of it. And that takes time. And a lot of guys give up. A lot of guys in the middle of it. I'm not going to get there. It's taken me. I'm still working on it. I'm still trying to be a better person. And then you'll have spouses that get excited when you get a little bit better. You're getting a little bit better. Here's another one. Oh my God, you're getting a little better. Here's another one. And then you start thinking, I'm never going to be good enough. Never. She keeps sending me to a new thing. And so your mind needs to be aware of what it's telling itself the entire journey.
I have a question. Do you think that in thinking of a serviceman or a servicewoman, that death in combat is a bigger risk or death by suicide?
Death by suicide is the biggest risk.
By far.
Easily the biggest risk.
Statistically, yeah.
Even among the 1%ers who do 99% of the work, suicide is still the most prevalent cause of death.
And you've seen that in special operations as well?
As well. I'd say at my former organization, it's probably 100% suicidal ideation, and divorces are probably 92%. 92%. You drop down a little bit to Green Berets, numbers are still higher, 40 to 60%. Suicides are higher. It's just.
Are you saying 100% suicidal organization in your former organization? You mean Delta there?
Yes, 100% suicidal ideation. Nobody people, I didn't think that. Okay, well, people I've talked to, all of them, I want to crash my car into this abutment. Just thinking about running your car off the road, shooting yourself, whatever. It comes instantly, it comes fast. And then it's gone for some. Others, it just keeps kind of going. And it's repetitive on a cycle. And then you're drunk one night. It's on a cycle. And then, half of those suicides, I think, are just, they're so blitzed out, wasted. They're commiserating their misery. They're writing letters to their families and laying all their watches and stuff out on the table. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes they wake up in the morning, it's hungover. Oh, I got too drunk to do it, right? Put the gun away, hide everything, don't say anything. For God's sake, don't say anything. And then go about your day like nothing happened. Now you got that on your mind.
And probably the vast majority of the suicidal ideations, what Tom described is very, very common. But for a lot of these guys, it's so sad because they're like, I think of killing myself 10 times a day, but I don't want to die. I don't want to kill myself. Why am I having these thoughts? It's because the area of their brain that manages that is broken due to the traumatic brain injury. So it's biology. So it's not even like people want it to be the sad story where like every vet's sitting crying about war, and that's just not the truth. Statistically, we know it's not.
The invisible wounds of war is a very sexy line, right? But you can scan your brain and see that injury. It's no longer invisible. You can see what it is, where it is, and the doctor can tell you what it will cause in you. A doctor that doesn't know you. I had to talk to a doctor out in L.A., called me on the phone, talked to me. I saw your brain scan. I want to talk about this. There's a big difference between yesterday and today. So here's what's going on. Through. He says, well, here's what's going on with your brain. Do you do this? Do you get angry? Do you get violent? Do you say stupid things even though you don't want to? Blah, blah, blah. Down the list. I'm like, oh my God, yes. Oh my God, yes. He doesn't even know I was in the military. He goes, your brain part here is red. It should be blue. Here, over here. And he's just laying it out. We can fix this with this and this and this and this. And it's all on Amazon. I'm like, what?
Yeah. They're a clinic that specializes and works a lot with the NFL. So it's very interesting. Again.
They can tell you what's wrong with it and they can fix it. So it's not embarrassing. It's just like a physical injury. Your brain is physical. It's in your head. It doesn't make it mental. It's a biological injury, like a torn blood vessel, a torn muscle, a broken leg. So it's not weird to talk about. But getting that word out and breaking the stigma is the difficult part.
So, Tom, you enlisted, it would have been in the late 80s. Is that right?
86, February 86.
Okay. What was your career like? How did you eventually, what pulled you towards special operations and how did that go? Because it seems like based on, what you were saying, and I was reading your book, it was a pretty quick rise from being a teenage kid driving to a concert in Indianapolis to working in special operations.
Yeah, I stumbled. A friend of mine came home. I like the Army. It's great. I'm going to Germany. I thought, okay, I can get out of Indiana that way. And then I'm spending 3 years in Germany. I'm thinking, oh, this is horrible. This is boring every day. We didn't have any money. So on the Mondays, I'd go and do motor pool Monday. Okay, my vehicle hadn't moved in a week, but I'm going to spend 4 or 5 hours checking it out. Okay, Monday's done, and then Tuesday, all right, we're going to sit here and study out of a book. We just hadn't have any money. So platoon sergeant would take me to take the platoon to a couple of schools, French Commando, German Ranger School, platoon competence training, which is run by Green Berets. I got a little different taste. Like, this is exciting. This is a little bit more. This is funner, energetic. I'm a young stud at the time, so I want to go do things.
And they have cooler hats.
They do have cooler hats. My friend was getting ready to go back to the States after 2 years in Germany. I had another year left, and he showed me a picture of his dad holding him up as a baby. And he's got his dad's green beret on, and I adopted that dream. Like, I'm going to take that dream. And I kind of went down that path to be a Green Beret. Find out years later, maybe 2 years ago, his dad had stolen valor. He wasn't even a Green Beret. I'm like,
Oh, wow.
I took stolen
Dream. Hey, well, I guess it has some upsides on occasion.
valor.
The and Green Berets focus on things like cultural work. Sort of. We have that whole, or at least my whole understanding of it is the constant battle from Vietnam of like winning over hearts and minds. Green Berets do a lot of that work in addition to operations. You have to. I was always told when I was younger, you have to be smart to be a Green Beret.
They're more well-rounded than anyone else we help in our organization. They are nation builders.
Yeah,
People think, they kill. They're humanitarians, man. They come in and they help nations get back on their feet. They teach them how to do it. They help rebuild infrastructure and defend themselves. And then they pack up, move out when they can defend themselves. They don't want to go in and kill a bunch of people. I mean, nobody does. But that's not even their mission.
Right. And so how long were you a Green Beret, and how did you eventually end up in Delta Force?
I was a Green Beret for about a minute. I think I finished language school. And when I was in language school trying to learn Persian Farsi at Bragg, knowing I was going to go to Kentucky at 5th grade, I was trying to learn Persian Farsi, and a couple of guys who I'd gone through the training school with were from the unit. I didn't know. And they came and approached me while I was in language school and handed me a number like, here, you need to call this number. We've been watching you. We think you have what it takes to join this organization. What do you think? I'm like, sure. Is it better? I'll go there if it's better. And I took the number, put it in my pocket. I go, all right, I give him a call. He goes, no, right now. I'm like, what? I'm on break right now. And I called him and set up a date for a psychological evaluation and a physical fitness test a couple weeks down the road. Made that, got my date, and then just went. It was another one of those things where guys approach me like, hey, what do you think of this? I'm like, if it's better, I'll do that. That's just my goal was what's the best thing I can do? And if this is boring, I'll keep going until I find something that grabs me.
So your grand plan that got you to Delta Force was, I'm not going to be bored.
Yeah. And the conventional forces can do that to you. They can bore you to a point of, I got to go do something, anything.
What was selection like for Delta Force? I mean, especially for somebody who wasn't a Ranger.
Yeah, I knew nothing. I had nothing. People read books like Inside Delta Force or Delta Force by Charlie Beckwith, and they talked about selections. I'm like, I didn't read any of those books. I didn't really know what Delta Force was. So I was just going to a selection to a place that was better. And selection was individual. It was an individual thing. I mean, the only time you were with people and could talk to people were when you were in your barracks. And there was about 200 of us, maybe 100 some. And every day you get taught what to do. So you could go to selection and not know a thing. I don't know how to read a map. I don't know how to put on my boots. I've never had a rucksack. They literally, and it's horrible, teach you from beginning to end how to pack a rucksack, how to wear your boots, how to read a map from, space all the way down to 10-meter grid zone identifier. It's literally boring if you know what you're doing. But for anyone who didn't know what they were doing, you could still go through selection. And so they teach you everything in instructional phase. You got an admin phase, PT test, ruck march. Are you crazy? And you got an instructional phase where they teach you how to do everything. They take you out, let you walk in the mountains, show you what it's like to walk in the mountains, teach you how to walk up a mountain straight up and not, lose strength in your legs, how to go down, when to drink, everything. And then they turn you out on your own to practice by yourself. And then you go to stress phase. And stress phase is basically you don't come back to the barracks ever. You go to the woods and sleep at night. So,
oh, wow.
Still humping. 10, 20, 30 miles a day. Every day, the points get longer and longer. You get weaker and weaker, and you think you got it down because it's like day 1 is 1 point, day 2 is 2, day 3 is 3, day 4 is 7. You're like, what? That was wrong. Day 8 is 9. You're like, wait a minute.
You're like, what day is it?
You changed this crap, and I don't know what's next. So they keep you on your toes. You can't talk to each other. You can't help each other. They don't talk to you. They write on the chalkboard. It's probably a computer screen now, but they used to write on the chalkboard, tell you where to be, when to be, and that's it. And that trickled from the start of formation, BDUs, boots, hat, out back, 4 rows in the line, and so-and-so's in charge too. Hey, meet out back around 8. And you're like, wait a minute. And so they break you down from the military down to civilians. Like, I'll see you out back, and if you're on time, great. If not, whatever, I'll see you out back.
Oh, interesting. So they're teaching you to be more independent in some ways. They're like unraveling some of what you got on the conventional side.
Oh yeah, and there's people that can't take it. There's officers or NCOs out there going, line up. They said to be out here, line up, and I'm like, and get in uniform. I'm in flip-flops and shorts. I'm like, it said be out back. It didn't say what to wear. It didn't say what time. It didn't say be in formation like it did before. I think that's different. You need to get in line, rah, rah, rah. And some dude sticks his head out the door. Come on in, guys. And it used to be he'd march out, march in front of you, file from right, column right, like military shit. File into the classroom now. And the last day walks in and says, hey, opens the door and waves and says, hey, guys, come on in. And you're like, what?
You're like, what is this?
A little breakdown from law and order, military command, and, you know, to, hey, buddy, what's up? Come on in here. And people can't take that. And so then you're done, you know, and then you got this long 40-mile march at the end. It's never ending. You think about quitting about 39 of those 40 miles. And if you make it, then you got a week-long psychological evaluation and a board after that. And then they want you. And then if they want you, they tell you selection's ongoing. Then you go to 6 months training courses. They tell you selection's ongoing. And then you go to jump school and demo, and they're like, selection's ongoing. And then your first 2 years in the organization, like, you're on probation, selection is an ongoing process. And then my 20 years of the organization, I heard almost every week, selection's an ongoing process, meaning they can unselect you at any time.
Any point, right? They didn't tell you this selection never ends.
Never ends. They're always deciding if they still want you.
We were talking about that idea of like, you had mentioned the idea of like in your old unit, 100% of the people having suicidal ideations. And I was curious for you, I'm assuming you were including yourself in that 100%. Was there a moment that you remember the first time, whether it was in the military or before, where you had a suicidal ideation?
Yeah. Was I still in? I'm going to think back. I think it was, my last 2 years, I was injured. I had 8 or 12 surgeries on my neck, back, and shoulder. Wow. And I was trying to stay fit. I was probably 40 pounds overweight. I was trying to still feel and look fit and stay connected. And I was thinking, this is it. The new guys are coming up and surpassing me. They're keeping up with me. I can't beat everybody on my team anymore. I can't beat everybody in my troop. And wow, all these souls are under my command now. And I don't think I'm 100%. I'm thinking, wow, I'm done. I've done what I'm sent here to do, and now there's nothing better than this. There'll be nothing higher than this, especially as broken as I am. So I started thinking about, drinking myself to death, shooting myself, though not taking action on that. And I really just thinking about it, driving, and all these flashes. I'm going to drive my car on that bridge above me or off this cliff. Just end this, this is just, I'm worthless. And then that just started to build over my years of retirement from 2010. 2008, probably the first times I remember, through 2010 retirement, it just went downhill fast. It was, now you're not part of that. Now,
because you lose your sense of like belonging and purpose.
I had none. I was chasing it, but I couldn't catch it. I didn't know what it was. So,
and it sounds like you were losing it already a little bit toward the end. And I think that's a thing with people who are elite, whether they're at the top of a political field or journalism or the military, that you can't imagine anything else. Like you've reached a zenith and now all of a sudden, there are options, but you just can't see them. I imagine like rewinding the clock and thinking about to a point like 1993 when you were in the Battle of Mogadishu. I'm sure were any of those things on your mind then? Like, did you look at the old timers ever and say, "Oh God, I hope that doesn't become me"?
When I was a young guy, get these old dudes out of the way. Let the young kids take over. Seriously, who's these old guys keep coming back? Oh, they're the founders, you asshole. I'm like, I don't care. Get them out of the way. They're blocking us. Let the younger guys move up. And then when I'm the older guy, I'm like, oh shit. I'm that old guy, and it hit me. It hit me like that. Like, oh, I'm that guy I made fun of. Oh no, now I'm that guy. I've been here 20 years. To most people, that should be like, oh my God, you spent an entire career at one organization. To me, it's like, man, I just 20 years. It's what the hell.
Yeah. What's left? Hey, going back, do you remember the first time you were in combat?
Yeah. 1993.
Okay.
Yeah. I think my first largest, other than shooting at people and getting shot at and being nervous, but that's what the Army is. Yay, high five, we went, right? Right. Back and tell stories. October 3rd, 1993, for the Battle of Mogadishu was basically my indoctrination into what combat.
Oh, wow.
And it's like 18-hour firefight where we were trapped, basically in enemy territory, trying to get out with people dead everywhere, crashed helicopters, and just trying to fight off thousands of people who wanted us all dead. And I think that was my light switch moment, where I was sitting on the bed that night, I don't know, midnight, maybe later. You could hear this convoy trying to get it to us with tanks and machine guns and everything. You could hear them through the city trying to fight their way to us.
They were hunting or that was our group trying to rescue.
Our group, and they were in firefights every block they were at with just everybody in town. And then they would get lost and turn around and try to find their way. They'd block the tires, but roads with burning tires, so they couldn't go that way. And it just trying to find their way to us all night long. And I could hear them.
What have you guys gone out there for?
We went out there to capture Mohammed Farah Hassan Adid, who was starving millions of people with lack of food and intimidation. And all the UN food that we were sending in, he was keeping it, starving millions of people. So we went in to kind of regulate, capture him, capture him. It was capture up front, and his lieutenants to try to negotiate and get this going, get these people fed, and put new people in charge, obviously, probably, and let nicer people run the place. They didn't really go along with our plans. We had to go in and do it ourselves. And that, going after Adid and then going after his lieutenants, and it finally led to that last battle where we captured a lot of his people who ended up being dead because they got shot by his own people and trying to shoot us. And it was just, that night on the bed when I asked my team leader, who was kind of a cold guy anyway, I was like, hey, you think they're going to make it? He looked at me. I was like, insert motivational speech here, right? He looks at me. He's like, I don't know. And he turned and walked off. And I was like, well, shit, we're out of ammo. I pulled out my knife on the bed, laid it out, and I'm thinking, all right. And I kind of calmed down.
Oh, wow.
I was terrified, but I calmed down. I was like, all right, well, shit, this is it. So let's just do as much damage as we can, save as many of my people as I can. And then when it happens, it happens, and I kind of felt a calm come over me.
And because you had resigned yourself.
Yeah, I'm dead. And so that, I think, is the day that I, kind of tipped.
It changed.
My post-traumatic stress just kind of started taking a hold of me. And all I could tell myself was this will never happen again, which I couldn't stop.
When I was at the Times, I had two colleagues who committed suicide. One, it was very obvious. I remember running into him that morning, and he wasn't a smoker, and he asked, like, what room do you guys go to smoke at? He asked me in the lobby. And I said, oh, it's up on the third floor at the end. And he was like, no, the place outside. And I was like, oh, that's up on like the 12th floor. And then you go this way and you walk out. There's no easy way to get to where he jumped from. So I'm not exactly sure how he did it, but he jumped off the side of the building. It was clear there was something wrong. The other colleague who committed suicide, he had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital. He had been given permission to go out with his family. He was happy. He was engaged. And then the next week, he got permission again. And he was totally happy. And we're trying to understand why he jumped off the George Washington Bridge. And it was like, oh, he was at peace. And I think one of the things that people don't really understand about suicide or depression is it comes in many forms. Like, there's no easy way to look at that guy sitting on the bed with his knife and know that, like, he might not be okay, right? Or it's the beginning of him not being okay. And you had told me that there were more suicides from the people who were at the Battle of Mogadishu than there were deaths. How many people did you guys lose that day?
19 that day. And,
wow.
I think 2-3 months ago, we just had another suicide of a friend of mine. That brings the number to 23 suicides versus 19 KIA.
So we're talking 1993 to now. So 21 years and 23 suicides. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Wow.
If you take that and compare, that's a small special operations organization. Now, if you take the military in whole over the last 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq combined, you have like 5,683 combat-related deaths.
Mm-hmm.
You have between 50 and, I don't know, they've gone up to 100,000 in suicides in the same amount of time. So the enemy can't touch us. The enemy cannot touch us in numbers. We're doing it ourselves. The inability to handle our own emotions and to admit it and get to work on it is what's killing us.
Yeah. Jen, I was going to ask you, When your work with military families, I know there has to be fear about the combat deaths, like you were talking about that kid in the classroom. Are there the same fears about suicide?
Yes, there are. And I think that's the big unspoken monster in the room is, Tom and I do these retreats for special operation couples and individuals. And we even looked at having spouse retreats. And what we started to hear was, I can't leave my husband for 4 days. And it's not because I don't trust him, it's because I don't know if he'll be alive when I get back.
Oh, wow.
So it's a constant fear. It's something that weighs so incredibly heavy on the family, the spouses, the children, especially in special operations. So the number triples every single year of active duty soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines who take their life. So it's constantly around us. Death is constant part of our lives, and then the fear of it.
Right. Right. Everything. Yeah, we were talking about the idea that the gun is the thing in everybody's toolbox, but the thing that's in everyone's life is this idea of death, whether it's killing someone else or being killed yourself or suicide or and I think we think very clearly about the physical toll of war, right? You get your thumb blown off, that's very obvious, or you have a back injury or you're paraplegic. And I don't think we really think of the emotional and mental cost of the work for the servicemen and women. And we definitely don't think about those costs for those families. And we know these traumas gets passed down generation to generation to generation. Is there something you think either the military, the private sector, the nonprofit sector can do to help?
Yes, I could tell you, it's our own fault. It's the government's fault for not putting it out there, but people have gotten out and created things and organizations and help that people can get. My wife was raised by abusive mom. I mean, horrible. She had her own trauma growing up from a very, very young age. She doesn't pass it on to her children. She got to work. Mm. She took care of what she needed to take care of. She realized it, didn't act like she was too good for it. And she got to work and she did not pass it on. So it cannot be passed on if you do the work. So our recruitment is to tell people, you don't need help. You need training, right? Nobody wants help. Nobody helped you learn your job for the military. Nobody helped you drive a car. They taught you. So we can teach you how to use the tools that we can give you to get past where you're at now. To deny that makes it your fault. You know better, do better. Now we're trying to tell people, here's the information. So now you know better. Now do better. It's in your hands. So a lot of it is in the hands of those warriors who don't take action because they just don't want to admit it.
Yeah, but it's that also that common, you see it with detectives, you see it with journalists, you see it with all sorts of people where it's like, my medicine is to drink my way, but certainly whatever it is, I'm not supposed to say it out loud. You guys I remember earlier in the conversation, you guys had mentioned childhood trauma and Jen, I'm sorry you went through that as well. But I was wondering a little bit about, for both of you, what your own healing journeys have been and what are some of the sort of important things that you think people can do? Because I was thinking about that, not asking for help and that fear of of being seen as weak. I think it requires the self-awareness that you were talking about, Tom, but also some humility and vulnerability, and thinking about your story, Jen. So many people just want to close the door on an abusive childhood, and they convince themselves, I'm not like that. It's not going to affect me. But really, there's this cesspool under the door leaking underneath it, and it will eventually overtake you. What gave you guys the courage, either individually or collectively, to reach out and to do the work? Because the work is not easy.
It's not.
I think it was love.
You have to pick your heart, though. Both are hard.
I think it was love that got Jen to work on me. I didn't have anything to get to work on. I was sorry at the time. And then she showed me I was not. So. And that showed me the way. It's you need a passionate person that loves somebody, that strong enough to stick around. I think we were made for each other. her whole life growing up. My childhood was not that bad. I got bullied by some other kids, but it wasn't that bad. My adult life was horrible. Her childhood was horrible. Her adult life not so bad. Well, not so bad.
So in a way, Jen's childhood, as bad as it was, like a blessing from it was that it prepared her to help you with your adulthood. You guys met after you retired, Tom?
Yes.
Yeah.
About 2 years, almost a year and a half after I retired. I wasn't looking too spiffy.
Yeah. It was an interesting come together. At that time, I was working in commercial film and photography, so completely different, 100% completely different world. And was hired to do a project with special operations. And then once I got there, I didn't want to leave. Like my whole dream of being a National Geographic photographer was quite honestly realized with this group. So, I spent about 3.5 years embedding as combat camera on stateside missions.
Yeah. And did you feel like your life experience helped you realize that Tom was going through something that he didn't know how to handle? Well,
Yeah, I did not think it was very fun being raised by someone with complex PTS who my mother never addressed it. Her father was schizophrenic, long line of abuse in her family line, which I was determined it would stop with me. But I don't quite honestly know if I don't know. I don't know how it would be different without that kind of trauma. I know I started to get to work on myself at 14 after my suicide attempt and started therapy at that age. So quite honestly, I fell in love with therapy and my therapist became kind of a second mom. So I had taken a very long break from it. I felt like I was pretty healed. I meet Tom, I meet all these guys. I start saying, like my therapist's name was Anne. I was like, Anne saved my life. She changed my life. If she could do that for me, I know, you guys could get the same kind of help. Because I spent probably 90% of my time with SEAL teams. And what I would hear from a guy is like, he just pour his heart out. And it was never about combat, by the way. In the years and years, I would hear stories. It was childhood trauma over and over and over and over again. Never dealing with it, saying like, why can't I get over this shit now? I've seen way worse things now in war and combat. So like, why is this stuff that my dad did, back when I was 10 still bothering me? And it just becomes like the sandwich, layer after layer after layer. And it gets so big that these guys are like, I don't even know how to take a bite out of it anymore.
Yeah, where does it even? Yeah, and I'm wondering. I mean, I may be wrong on this, but I'm wondering whether the act of going to the military sort of shuts off the opportunities to do some of that healing. Maybe some of the other.
You get called all kinds of names for being nice.
That is a positive statement. That's positively true statement.
Yeah, so for you, so when you're stepping into his life, you have the hope, you believe that, because I imagine as a 14-year-old sort of having seen lots of young people at that age, embracing therapy and utilizing it when you are sort of like not in the world's best environment does require a little bit of courage. And at 14 to really be able to see that a parent is so far off course, even beyond sort of like they're just not letting me do what I want, but like to see that they're really far off course takes courage. What role, Jen, do you think courage for some of these operators plays in getting help? I imagine some come to you, but there's probably a large group that wouldn't pick up the phone.
Yeah, we deal with those guys that don't pick up the phone, whether it's law enforcement, SWAT, special operations. And it's so beat into them culturally that it's not okay to be not okay, which is just, I saw it on the wall in one operation unit. They had no fail mission really big. And I'm like, well, that's not true. Like, you guys are going to fail all the time. It's what do you do with failure?
Right.
How do you operate in failure? Not that there is no failure. Like, you guys are getting set up essentially for failure, for like to have your egos just smashed. And I sat in those team rooms and I watched them tear each other to like nothing. And it would be over. They called them AAR sessions. And I would look at Tom and I'm like, oh my God, I thought that was a good mission. And it was like 2.5 hours of you went left instead of right. You were 3 seconds slower. You did. And it's just,
Oh, wow.
I never forget it. And Tom goes, we don't give each other pats on the back. You do a good job. That's your job. You stay alive. But I'm going to ream your ass if you do one thing wrong, because that could get you killed and it could get everyone killed. And so that type of
environment where you're always going to get an F.
always. And so they come home and what do? They do the AAR process. Yeah, I'm glad you cleaned the house, but you couldn't get to laundry. Oh, I see that this is done, but that isn't. I mean, there's probably 1 million of your viewers and listeners right now going, that was my day.
Hey, the laundry does itself, man. You can do the dishes while
See?
the laundry machine washes itself.
Yeah.
There's always a better way to do shit, right?
Right? Yeah. Yes. That's after action review, right? The AR, yeah.
And so, like, if they're used to every day picking apart every minute detail because it's life or death, guess how they view the rest of their life?
Yes. Well, and view themselves, right? Like internally, yeah.
Percent. I mean, people will look.
They can never be good enough.
Yes, they look at them and they're like, "Oh my God, they're so cocky, they're so arrogant." I'm like, let me tell you, the men I have met have been the most insecure men I've ever met in this community. Fragile because of what their job requires them to do, what the emotional.
It sounds like, Tom, there might be a difference of opinion here.
I get really, really mad if she calls me sensitive.
Well, but one of the things you said earlier, Tom, that really struck me was, you had made a really brief comment about the importance of having a loving person. And I was just thinking about what we were talking about, all these people not reaching out for help, that whether it's a spouse or it's a girlfriend or boyfriend or it's a friend or it's a family member, that they're probably, when you're afraid to ask for help or afraid to ask for training, as you put it, it is so important to have somebody who can love you, see you, actually see you for who you are, as opposed to who you're trying to display, and who loves you for who you are and loves you enough. Do you think Jen saved your life?
I can't answer that because she'll yell at me. I do. And she'll say, I can't save you. You saved yourself. But she certainly stopped me from taking my own life. Actively stopped me from taking my own life several times and stuck with it and showed me the path. She just continued to show me the path, patience and love and aggression at times, because I was putting her through the ringer too, but she was tough enough to stand there and go toe to toe with me because it was worth it. And all that love that you think doesn't exist after everything you go through, when you see it again, and you grab a hold of that. That's what you don't let go of.
Yeah, gives you something to hold on to. One of the things that I was wondering, why, this is your healing journey, and you could have probably rode off into the sunset, but why did you decide to take what you learned and bring it to other people? And what do you think the impact has been of that?
Oh, man, I'm tired of seeing my friends die. I've had a lot of people, close friends. I've had a lot of people that were acquaintances and work friends that have taken their own lives. And I know it's senseless. It's useless. It causes more hurt than it helps. Suicide does. It removes one person's problem and dumps it on everybody else around them. And I know how, not even considering the suicides, I know how the people that haven't committed suicide feel. The people like me, the people like my other friends who don't admit it, and then the ones who quietly admit it, but not publicly. That was really what helped me bring it to other people. The fact that if you have something that works so well and you don't give it to someone else, what are you doing with it? What are you doing with that thing if you're holding it for yourself? That's kind of selfish. And so
why hold on to a gift that where it costs you nothing to share it?
I could have ridden out and made $300,000-$400,000 a year doing very little work, but we chose to make a quarter of that and do the hard stuff because it matters.
How about you, Jen?
I think I just got tired of hearing the same story on repeat. So Green Beret, SEAL, doesn't matter what branch they were in. I was hearing the exact same story. How do I be a better husband? How do I be a better father? How do I put this monster back in the box? And as Tom and I started going through very intensive therapy, cognitive behavioral and emotionally focused, And we started going through these treatments, transcendental meditation, transcranial magnetic stimulation, psychedelics, supplementation, getting the heavy metals removed from his body, getting him off 16 pills from the VA.
And then she took all that and put it in her own book. So it's like a self-help manual on everything that we did.
What's the name of that? What's the name of that book?
Arsenal of Hope.
Oh, perfect.
Do you know the word arsenal on it? You know what I mean? Arsenal of Hope is a dangerous thing.
No, but I think Tom's right. If you find something that works, you share it. And what was happening to us is Tom was getting better and better and better, and that man that I knew was under there became louder and bigger, and the parts that he didn't like started to get smaller and quieter. And so we were like, we have to bring this to people. And quite honestly, the best testimonial we have is on our refrigerator. A little drawing of a boy and a girl from a girl named Jane who said, "Thank you for saving my mommy and daddy." And that's what sits in our fridge. And again, we
get messages like that all the time. My mommy and daddy aren't fighting as much. Thank you. Our relationship's been better than it's ever been. You saved us. You saved our relationship. You helped our children. It's like, we love hearing that, but we're like, no, you did it.
We hear adults writing saying, my father served in Vietnam. And now is the first time I've understood
him. Oh, wow. Yeah. You know, what you guys are saying reminds me of this Anne Frank quote that I love. I think it was something like, no one has ever become poor by giving.
True.
Yeah, that they're those blessings. So I want to give you guys a chance if you want to. I think all of this to me is very powerful, but also doesn't just apply to people who are in the military or special operations. Like on some level, I think if we all sort of lived with this, and I know institutions can play a role in it, but it's like that idea, only you can really ultimately save yourself. But I think that there are lessons here that anyone could learn about self-awareness, perseverance, willingness to get help, and healing, and the importance of healing. And I just wanted to see if you guys had any closing thoughts on what you would want people to take away from your words.
These are human issues that we're talking about. The military is a different job. Everyone associates it with, the killing and the death. Most people don't kill, or most people don't see people die. They still have issues. We worked with law enforcement. We worked with other first responders during COVID, hospital workers, just seeing other people's trauma. You're not a warrior. You're not a commando. You can't commando your way out. You need the tools. Top tier 1 special operations folks in the world can't manage it. They've been trained and trained and trained. You have mental health educators and personnel that have mental health issues. No one gets away from it, right? You have to deal with it. And the longer you wait, the worse it gets. And then it's harder to deal with. And the older you get, the less you want to do it, less you want to admit it. So you just tackle it right away. It's okay. It's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to talk about it.
Chad?
I think for me, it's to know that you're not alone. So many people feel completely isolated. They feel alone. They feel crazy. They feel different. They feel unheard, unseen. And just to that person, you are seen, you are heard, you are valuable, and you matter. And you're never alone. There's always somebody that cares about you, that loves you, that wants you here.
So true. So true. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. If you'd like to join us for more discussions with me and other listeners, we can be found on most social media platforms, including a listener-driven Facebook group called the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. For deeper conversations with our guests and live conversations with other listeners, you can also join us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Silver Lining Handbook. For those of you who are already Patreon members, check out our special bonus episode with Tom and Jen. I'm Jason Blair, and this is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast.